It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. I'm not the equivalent of MacArthur, but like him, I promised to return, and here we are. Thanks for riding with us this morning. I appreciate you. If you're joining with us on our website, appreciate that. Thank you very much. You can capture our broadcasts daily, live, from 8 to 10 a.m. We generally don't run all the way to 10, but at least you have an opportunity to kind of ride with us. And we're working to improve our broadcasts every day. We've recently completed working on some studio work for an actual television broadcast versus just radio. For the record, just as a quick update and a little house cleaning, we'll be changing. We've just obtained some software that will enable us to include some things that will help improve our show visually, like this green screen behind me will soon be a background that will look a little bit more professional. If you can help us and support us in any way, we're always short of money because I fund everything out of my pocket, and I could certainly appreciate your assistance. You can do so by going to our website. There's a PayPal link there that you can use, and even if you don't have a PayPal account, you can still use it. And I encourage you to do so if there's any way that you can help us, and it doesn't matter how small a widow's mite that may be or how big. If you'd like to support our efforts as we move forward and try to build this, we're trying to find a building where we can actually put in a full-blown studio. And if you are an individual who would like to make an investment in liberty and an investment in freedom and an investment in the truth, then please make sure that you contact me. You can do so by contacting me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. Okay, our topic for this particular segment is the surveillance police state. You know, I did a show yesterday about the fact that the state of Washington in the city of Seattle has accepted a significant grant from the Department of Homeland Security to install light poles that will actually monitor and track people on the street through your self-imposed tracking device. You know, this cell phone is a tracking device. It has a GPS chip in it that the government has mandated must be in it. Now, their excuse for it at the time they did it was, well, in case you have an accident and you fall over a ravine and you can't tell us where you are, we can follow the GPS chip. Well, if you believe that, you also believe that, you know, the infinitesimal chance you have of being killed by a terrorist attack is greater than it really is. But I digress. The simple truth is that this particular device has something in it called a MAC address. And that MAC address is an actual hard-coded address. It's like a fingerprint. And it can never be changed. It's physically embedded in the device. And there's an infographic that has come out this morning, which is, and it's incorporated in some government documents, that DHS is behind this case in Seattle. And I got to tell you, this is Edward Snowden-type expose. This information was captured by the folks over at InfoWars, and I know a lot of people can't stand Alex Jones. They think he's a blowhard and all that, and they think conspiracy theorist. But I got to tell you something. It's also covered under a website called Real Story. I think it's Real Story, and the point is that this document is something that the mainstream media is hiding from you. So that ought to tell you something. This document exposes how this video surveillance system works. Basically, these light poles have a couple of aspects to them. One, they are boxes that can capture, even when your Wi-Fi service in your cell phone, or if your cell phone is not actively connected to anything other than the mobile network who's your service provider, you know, an AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, whatever. Even if the Wi-Fi capabilities of the phone are turned off, it can capture the last 1,000 locations that you have been at. You see, GPS works like this. And I want you to think of the analogy of, if you remember Hansel and Gretel, how they found their way out of the forest. They dropped breadcrumbs, right? GPS does something called breadcrumbs. And essentially what happens is every once in a while, it reaches out, touches a satellite, and says, where exactly am I? And it can pinpoint location down to a few yards. So GPS builds these coordinated databases that it kind of holds in memory. Your phone holds it in memory. And this system goes out and says, that MAC address belongs to John Doe, and I'm telling that MAC address to download the last 1,000 GPS locations that particular guy has been at, John Doe has been at. Now, of course, that's a total and complete invasion of your privacy. To make matters worse, this system that Seattle has employed has camera systems mounted on it that are tapped into federal government databases, and they're incorporating facial recognition and microphones that can actually listen to and surveil the conversations that are going on at street level. Holy smoke. Did we just step into 1984? Yes, we did. You see, the problem is that on page 55 of this port security video surveillance system with wireless mesh network, that's what the title of this project is, this document has an infographic that explains and reveals the system's communication abilities in regards to the Port of Seattle and the DHS, and how they're funneling all this information back to the Department of Homeland Security, despite funding for millions of dollars of taxpayer money. This information goes to the Kings County Sheriff's Office, the Washington State Ferry, the Port of Seattle, Seattle Fire Department headquarters, the Marshal Service, Harbor Patrol, a fusion center, which is a Department of Homeland Security spying center built domestically here in the United States for monitoring Americans, Coast Guard, and the police. Really? You mean to tell me that Mrs. McGillicuddy walking down the street in Seattle with her cell phone is being spied upon by the same device that she's relying on to have a conversation with her grandchildren? For what purpose? Well, the simple truth is this. The purpose of this, the real purpose of all of this, is to accomplish one thing: the total access of all communications of all Americans, which enables them to totally dominate all Americans. The enslavement of America is actively being rolled out. And you've heard me talk about this if you're a long-time listener, or if you're a first-time listener. Listen, I got tons and tons and tons of videos out there that talk about this stuff. But we are now living in a police state. It's just that most Americans are completely and totally unaware. We live in a society where everything that you do is monitored, tapped, watched, listened to. Not only on a local basis, but a statewide basis and a federal basis. How do I know that? And what am I using as my arguments for that? Well, first of all, there are a lot of different systems that are monitoring you and tracking you, including the idea of, and this goes all the way back to the implementation of, as an example, Real ID. You remember Real ID? Real ID is the implementation of facial recognition so that you can be identified. And you have to show and prove your identity with birth certificate and passport and all of this documentation. Your face is captured. Facial recognition, which is a mathematical equation for your particular face that is unique to you as a fingerprint, is incorporated and thrown into a database. It's put onto a chip on your driver's license. The truth is, Real ID has been adopted almost universally across the country. And in addition to that, there is a few states that have opted out of it, including my own home state, and here in Missouri. And yet our governor has implemented Real ID, even though we have a law that prohibits him from doing so. when you go to get your driver's license renewed. You are giving up your facial How do I know? Well, let me ask you this. Last time you went to have your driver's license taken, did they ask you to take off your eyeglasses? You got it. Now, there's another article which I'm gonna incorporate, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can find this article in the comment section, or not in the comment section, but in the show description section. This is from CBS in D.C. It's a CBS local. Government, or this report, here's their headline. Report, government spying causing self-censorship and privacy fears among U.S. writers. This is an interesting article because this shows you the unintended consequences of what's happening in our society. And for those of you who say, well, wait a minute now, I don't really care if they monitor my phone calls and my emails, and if they monitor and track me where I go. I don't do anything wrong. I don't engage in any kind of illegal behavior. I don't do any drugs. I don't go any places that would be construed as being, uncomfortable. I don't engage in dangerous behavior. I don't visit whorehouses. I don't go to bars. I don't do any of those things. I don't talk about anything that would be construed or could be misconstrued to make me into a terrorist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I got to tell you, you're making a mistake when you think that way. Because what you don't realize is the impact that this is having not only on you, but on everyone around you. First of all, I wrote an article, and it's up on americasvoicenow.org, and I would encourage you to go take a look at it because it's a very, very accurate depiction of the idea that the NSA and the Department of Homeland Security and everybody else is fully versed in the principle and the idea and the concept of the 6 degrees of separation principle. Now, you've all played this game, or many of you have probably heard of it, and basically what this game is, and it's kind of an interesting game, it's called the 7 Steps to Kevin Bacon, right? And basically this is a game where, by connecting the dots and the people who anyone can be connected back to the actor Kevin Bacon in 7 steps. So, I know this guy who knows that guy who's a producer who knows Kevin Bacon. Boom, there's 4 steps. Or I know this guy who knows another guy who knows another guy that's in business with a guy that knows Kevin Bacon. Boom, 7 steps. The truth is, this article exposes how, and this is a mathematical equation. First of all, the NSA follows at least 4 steps by their own admission. So you may be connected to someone who is connected to someone who is connected to someone who is connected to someone that, quite frankly, is connected to someone who is suspicion or is under suspicion or is basically, a terrorist or has donated to terrorism or whatever the case may be. The name of this article and the title of it is NSA, DHS, and border spying is the final straw to tyranny in America. It's on our first, when you first jump on and those, that slider moves by, it's about the 4th or 5th story over there. And this basically talks about the massive expansion of the police state in the United States of America and how every American should be fully aware of how dangerous and harmful this is. Because even if you believe yourself innocent and immune to the dragnet, what you don't realize is that you are communicating with someone who's communicating with someone who's communicating with someone who's communicating with someone that is not. And where we find ourselves now is these massive databases that are being built. I mean, look, the facility that was built in Utah by the National Security Agency is 17 football fields in size. The thing has an electric bill that would cover a city the size of Las Vegas monthly. It is nothing but a magnificently huge, giant hard drive. By the NSA's own admission, they can store everything about you in a file in a directory for less than $300 at today's storage rates. At the price of storage, computer electronic storage, they can store every phone call, every email, every web search you've ever done, every piece of mail you get, because the post office is now photographing your mail, every conversation that you have, because they don't save them as an audio file. They convert them to text and then scan them with a digital interface that says it does a speech-to-text conversion, and then that text is then scanned for keywords. The president came out a little while ago and said, we're not listening to every American's phone calls. And that was a bit of Bill Clinton legalese, because he's right. They're not listening to every American's phone calls. They're taking all the content of that phone call. They're storing it. They're converting it to text, and then they save it, because text can be compressed far greater than audio can. And once it's converted to text, it can be stored in very, very small areas. Now, I'm not saying that they're actively listening to Grandma McGillicuddy. I am saying that at some point in time, if there's a need for Grandma McGillicuddy to be reviewed, or she can be used as a pry bar to get to someone else, her information will be brought up. It will be reviewed. And they'll look for a way to compromise Grandma McGillicuddy to get her to either cooperate or work cooperatively with them. You see, what we're building now in the United States of America is a massive enemies list. And when free speech by writers and newspapers and media sources is compromised, and I'm going to read you a couple of the comments from some of these writers in this article on CBS, because they're extraordinarily effective. There's actually a report from this group called the Penn Center, and their slogan is free expression and literature. Chilling effects. The NSA surveillance drives U.S. writers to self-censor themselves. Now, this was just produced on November 12th in this year, so it's only a couple days old. I got to tell you, here's their comments. 28% of writers have curtailed or avoided social media activities, and another 12% have seriously considered doing so. 24% have deliberately avoided certain topics in phone and email conversations, and another 9% have seriously considered it. 16% of writers have avoided writing or speaking about a particular topic, and another 11% have seriously considered it. You have to look at the implications and the unintended consequences of what's happening to our society. When 1 in 6 writers is unwilling to speak their mind for fear of government retribution, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a police state. We are living in a state of tyranny. I'm not suggesting that. I'm flat out declaring it. And I'm telling you that your government, your federal government, your state governments, your city and your county and your community governments are operating in open and blatant treason. The job and the functional role of government is not to oppress you. It is not to dominate you. It is not to enslave you. Government serves one purpose. It was intended to be the functional protection of the general society as a whole, with a special focus on, in our form of government, protection of the minority, down to the smallest minority of 1. In other words, not only is the minority protected of color or sex or racial origin or whatever you want to pick, ethnic origin, the minority is as small as you. That's why you have these rights that the Constitution doesn't give you. They don't grant them to you. These rights aren't granted to you by the Constitution or by the Declaration of Independence. They weren't granted to you by the framers. They've been given to you by God, by our Creator, and by natural law. Natural law says that you have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to speak freely. You have the right to worship who you so choose. You have the right to love whom you want. Natural law says that you have the right to be secure and not abused by your own government for their own nefarious purposes, to nudge, direct, and funnel you into some social herd. Government's purpose is to secure and protect our liberties and our freedoms. And our Declaration of Independence very clearly stated that when government becomes abusive of these principles, we have an obligation, nay, we have a duty to overthrow that government and replace it with one that is more amenable to our needs. Now, I don't want you to take that and say, oh my goodness, this guy is advocating armed revolt. No, I'm not. I believe the Second Amendment is the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. It was never intended to be used. Like the principle of mutually assured destruction that comes with nuclear weapons, the Second Amendment was merely a deterrent to protect us from tyrants feeling overemboldened to go out and commit tyranny. But through a long series and train of abuses and usurpations, our government has become an enemy of the people. And you have become an enemy of the state. Your government fears you. But they don't fear you because you will bring them under control. They fear that they will be overthrown. And that's a big difference. I do advocate massive, peaceful civil disobedience. I advocate that literally 20 million Americans, 25 million Americans, 50 million Americans rise up and march on your state and your federal capitals in a peaceful but massive show of civil disobedience. We just saw how the Egyptians did so. And they were successful to a point. They made a big mistake. They didn't have an organization, a group, that was prepared to step into power when they ejected their tormentor. And that void, which natural law requires, must be filled. Nature cannot accept a void. And government cannot accept a void. And so, and I'm not a believer in anarchy. I am a believer in government. But I'm a believer in microscopic federal government, where we need to look for it under a microscope to find where it affects us. I'm a believer in miniature state government, that we have to look hard to see how our state government affects our everyday lives. I'm for self-governance by you, because I believe that you have the wherewithal, the capability, and your own self-interest to do the right things for you. I believe that you're intelligent enough to determine what is the right insurance policy for you in your health care. I believe that if you truly care about your child, you'll put a safety belt on that child. But I don't believe that government has a right to mandate that you do that. I don't believe that government has a right to mandate that you purchase insurance. If you choose to go insurance-less, that's fine. You must be prepared to deal with the consequences of that, however, and you cannot expect that someone else is going to constantly walk around with a bedpan trying to catch what you drop because you refuse to empty your bowels properly. You see, the problem here, ladies and gentlemen, is that our society has grown utterly and totally dependent upon the nanny state. I believe that we have the ability, albeit suppressed, it's been submerged, it's been pushed down, to be free and independent, to make good decisions on our own. But I also will tell you that when writers are self-censoring, when you are self-censoring your phone call and you're afraid to use certain words or phrases, we have reached the pinnacle where we have to make a decision. Will we take back our government? And will we force that government to operate within its fiduciary capacity? Or will we completely capitulate and go into that dark night of tyranny? When 16% of the writers who are polled here, and of course it's a poll and nothing more, but it's a report that's got a lot of substantial backing to it. This isn't a poll that's taken like one of those fly-by-night polls that, call up and twist the results. When 16% of writers out there avoid writing or speaking about certain topics due to threatening privacy concerns, when 85% of the surveyed writers are worried about government surveillance of Americans, and nearly 3/4 of them, according to their own words, quote, have never been as worried about privacy rights and freedom of the press as they are today, the proof is there. We are stepping into a period where Pandora's box has been opened. The genie has been released. And there's no way that we're going to be able to close those doors with the current people who are holding the box, holding the bottle. We can't put the genie back in the bottle as long as our tormentor, our oppressor, is holding the bottle in one hand and the cork in the other, and holding them up out of our reach. We must take the bottle. We must take the box from our oppressor and put the cork back in. Put the lid back down. Close the gates of tyranny, terror, oppression. If we do not do that, and we do not take that action forthwith, we will awaken to find ourselves in chains. Mental, financial, spiritual, physical. It's our nation to lose. The question is, are you willing to stand up and defend it? You've been listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Mike Evans. I'd love to hear from you and hear about your opinion on this segment. I know we can't cover all of it in a half hour, but, by all means, you're certainly welcome to comment to me. I'd love to hear more about it. Our next topic that we're going to cover in our next segment is amnesty equals treason. Let's not gild the lily, folks. Let's just call it what it is. I'm tired of the press setting the tone and the tenor of our conversation when they've been compromised. It's time for Americans to stand up and recognize that until our borders are sealed, no discussion should occur on immigration. This is like triage. We tie off the bleeding artery and we stop the bleeding first. After that, we can save the patient. But we don't deal with the superficial wounds. We deal with the bleeding first. We'll be right back.